All right, so the first exercise we're going to start off with is the bench press. And Mark, the bench press is very controversial. We live in the functional strength craze world right now, where everyone feels that if you're not standing on a Bosu ball doing squats, then you're not doing something functional. Why do you think it's important to keep the bench press in someone's program, and in particular with athletes?
You know, I'm an advocate of the bench press as an upper body strength movement. I agree with you that everybody's trying to get real functional. I think that if you develop strength in the upper body with the bench press, it's difficult not to do, or to do an exercise other than the bench press to develop some of the strength in the upper body. I like the overhead stuff too. But if you're developing your body as a whole, you'll be able to transfer the power that you develop from the bench press and utilize it in a functional way. So I think, you know, not everything's going to simulate what you do in athletics or in whatever movement you're trying to perform, but you should be able to adapt the strength developed in the bench press and to what you're trying to do.
So rather than do movements where you're trying to duplicate what you would do in a sport, you want to work the exercises that actually build that full body strength that you can transfer over.
Right. You're not always going to be able to duplicate movements. And, you know, in athletics, especially football, you know, like it or not, coaches want to know how much kids bench press.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's one of the strength movements that they're interested in. So, you know, we continue to do it.
And then the NFL is still, of course, part of the testing and all that. So something where someone has to be good at the bench press. Now, the bench press is probably the ultimate male ego move, where everyone wants to get better at it, and very few people have good technique. If we walk into any gym, not your gym, but any other gym in town, we'll see some really poor technique where people's butts are coming off the bench and they're bouncing the bar. What are some of the common mistakes that people make with the bench press that you see, and how would you correct those?
I think you got to start with the setup first, making sure that your feet are dug in the ground. You got to wind yourself underneath the bar like a spring. Make sure you're nice and tight. Have somebody lift the bar out to you instead of trying to lift it from behind your head.
Why is that important? Why is it important for someone to help you with the lift off?
It's just difficult if you're, especially, you know, when we tell our guys put their eyes right underneath the bar, it's difficult to pull the bar, especially a heavier weight, from over your head out into the position you need it in.
Yeah.
So why not just get some help? It leaves you less susceptible to injury. It fatigues your shoulders some trying to do that. So you can set up better on the bench press and then allow somebody to lift the bar out to you. So I think, you know, the position on the bench, the hand position's got to be correct. Breathing sometimes is messed up. Bar location, once you find that sweet spot on your chest, making sure you hit it every time. You're not moving the bar around on the chest. So a lot of things that we'll cover in technique are common mistakes. But the more you can do this, once you find the technique that works for you, everybody's got a little bit of variations.
Right.
The more you can simulate that every time, the better you're going to be. Okay, you leave less things to chance. It's like shooting free throws. You want to do the same way every time.
So with grip, how wide or narrow do you recommend, or is that going to vary with each body type or a particular goal?
It's going to vary with each body type and where your strengths and weaknesses are. As a general rule, we're going to be about 45 degrees to the body, somewhere in there. So our elbows aren't flared way out, and they're not right next to our side. It's somewhere in that 45 degree. Now we'll adjust it accordingly, according to the person from there.
Right.
But somewhere in that vicinity.
So perhaps if someone has weak triceps, they would focus more on the close grip, and then if someone wants to maximum performance, maybe it's going to be a wider grip, or as wide as they can go.
Right. If they got weak triceps and they need to strengthen their triceps, obviously we want to use the triceps more.
Right.
If you're trying to find out how much you can do, obviously you've got to use a grip and a position that's going to utilize the strongest. Maybe if your shoulders are stronger, maybe you're a little bit wider.
Right.
You know, just if you're trying to find out what you can do.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to affect and strengthen areas that are weaker, obviously, you got to adjust your grip accordingly.
Now, breathing, of course, is very important for any exercise or any level of performance. A lot of people recommend breathe in and then breathe out when you're pressing the bar. Is that what you would do, or is there a better style of breathing?
I'll tell athletes to breathe in very deeply and hold it like you're going underwater.
Right.
And then once you get to your sticking point, you can breathe through your sticking point or right afterwards.
Yeah. Would that be for a maximum rep, or if someone's repping it out, would they try to get into more of a breathing cadence?
If you're doing more than one rep and it's sub-maximal, we'll take one deep breath and do as many reps as we can with that one deep rep before we exhale.
Okay.
Keeps the body tighter. If you think about breathing, every time you breathe out, your body relaxes.
Right.
So it's hard to retighten it each time. So if you're doing, 225 rep tests for a combine type thing, you want to take one deep breath, hold it in, do as many reps as you can. Right before you start to get to where you can't do anymore, you breathe out, take another breath in,
Right.
do as many as you can again. That way, you're like the spring on the bench. You stay
Yeah.
nice and tight.
Now, some people look like contortionists when they're bench pressing, where their butt's coming a foot or more off of the bench. Do you have any tips to help someone with that, or is it just a question of focus on technique more and just get better at it?
I'll have the athlete widen his feet out a little bit so he can still push with his feet
Right.
and still use his body, but his butt doesn't come up. Okay,
Right.
so if you adjust the feet accordingly, you can still get that push, but your butt's not going to leave the bench. And a lot of times that just screws up your bar path on top anyway, because you push with your feet and it moves the bar forward over your eyes. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it's not as much of a help as you would think.
Now, one technique that I hear often is you want to have a sensation of pushing yourself back through the floor. So when you're pushing the bar away from you, you want to push back into the bench. Is that something you do or something you recommend?
Like I said, we wind ourselves in.
Right, so you're really pushing
pull
yourself
our lats
into it.
underneath us.
Right.
And it allows you to push that much harder. So I wouldn't say you're pushing yourself away from the bar. It allows you to push the bar up more
Right.
versus benching with a flat back.
Yeah.
So we want to arch our back a little bit. We want to keep our butt on the bench, but we want to tuck our lats behind us and work ourselves into position when we're on the rack or the bar's on the rack before
Right.
we even take the weight off.
Now, you're a big proponent of setting the core, having very strong core strength, especially for exercises such as the squat and deadlift. But also the core does come into play with the bench press as well. Is there a particular technique you use to amplify that further, to really tighten up the midsection?
Yeah, we'll teach them, when we go through our core strength development, we'll
Right.
talk about this. We want to bench almost like we're squatting. So we want to be nice and tight in our center. The only difference is we're laying down. So the body position is the same. We want to set our core. We want to squeeze tight. We want to draw in. So there's no difference on this than there is if we're standing up.
Right. Now, the final question before we have Pierre come out and demonstrate is, with powerlifting competitions, you have to pause the bar and then wait for a judge to signal you to press. Is it beneficial, do you think, for people in general to focus on pausing for a second or two maybe at the bottom of each rep rather than touch and go on every single rep?
We'll do both, but the more you learn to pause, the easier it is and the less you feel like you have to do touch and go.
Right.
The restriction on touch and go is that you feel like you're slamming the bar off the chest.
Right.
All right, some people do.
And some people's form just starts getting
exactly.
sloppy if they're just banging.
So the more you
yeah.
can stay under control, keep tight on the bottom, and accelerate the bar up from the bottom,
Right.
The better it is. So we do touch and go, but it's under control touch and go. It's
Right.
just not slamming the bar off the
Right.
chest. Because you'll get a little bit of that downward momentum that you'll be able to utilize on the way up. So sometimes you can push through a weight that may be difficult if you're pausing on the chest. But then again, as you get better and better at the pause, you feel less and less need to do the touch and go.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Well, let's have Pierre come out and demonstrate the bench press for us, and then maybe we can take a look at some of the moves he's doing. Now, Pierre is a top-ranked powerlifter, very strong guy.
So he's going to wind himself in. All right, so he's nice and tight. His feet are wide right now.
Right.
All right. He's got an arch going here, but his butt's touching the bench.
Okay.
Okay. He'll put his hands. Obviously, he's experienced that bench press. All right. He's not extremely wide. He's not extremely narrow. Okay. He's going to take it off. Breathe in. Same spot on the chest every time. It's straight up to just slightly back towards the eyes.
Right. So it's like a well-oiled
Good.
machine. Every single rep
Good.
looks like the first one.
So now he's touching and going, but it's under control. He's not slamming it off the.
Right.
Basically doing a warm. That's good, Pierre.
Excellent. Thank you, Pierre. Now, with the grip, one thing you showed me when I was training over here is we would get into these right angles,
Yeah.
like this. Why do you feel this is important?
I like to use the grip like that because you're on the meaty part of your hand here.
Right.
All right. It's directly above where your forearm is. I think when you get the bar on the end of the hand,
Right.
now it places more pressure
Yeah.
on the wrist right here. And I don't think, if you think about striking like martial arts, you're
Right.
going to hit it with this part of the hand.
Right, the
and
meaty
you
part
can
of the hand,
apply
exactly.
more force that way, all right, than you can on the end of the hand.
Right.
All right, and again, you can move it around a little bit on the palm, depending upon comfort. So maybe it's just a little more here, it's a little
Right.
more there, but you got more. You can develop more power, more strength from that part than pushing away on the end. up by the pads on your fingers there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And then you just got to adjust, making sure we still can adjust our elbows accordingly to where we're going to get them about that 45-degree position when you take it off.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's just something I found that works better, and it affects the wrists less. You know, you get it where it's up on the pads on your fingers. Sometimes you got to start wrapping your wrists up a little bit more. And I think it's just like, you know, you can strike, just like you're striking with the palm of your hand, you're doing the same thing with the bar.
Is there any fear that you may drop the bar?
I still like the thumb wrapped around though.
Right, so the thumb's not going to be,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not an advocate of the false grip.
Yeah, so
You know,
basically these two fingers are helping
you're still,
keep the...
yeah, exactly. But you're just enough to keep the bar there, especially, you know, if it gets hot or whatever and you put the thumb on that side and you're driving hard, the last thing you want to do is drop that on the sternum. So I'm not a big fan of the false grip. You know, just hook the thumb around.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now with improving the bench press, just getting stronger with it, do you recommend spending a lot of time focusing on the bench press, or do you bring in similar type moves to avoid burnout? Some argue that if you just bench all the time, your central nervous system is just going to get overworked, and then you're just going to start losing performance.
I like to do, if I'm trying to get good at something, I like to do it.
Right.
Okay. Not to say that you can't do the variations also. That may help with areas that you're weak in.
Yeah.
Okay. So one day a week you may regular bench. The second day a week, if you're going to do bench press twice a week, some type of variation. But I still think even if you're not doing a regular bench press, a board press or chain bench, something with a bar is similar enough that you're going to still keep the technique. I just think that if you get away from benching with a bar too long, it takes you a while to get back into the habits that you've created, or positive habits, and you forget some of them, and then it takes a few weeks to remember what you were doing.
Yeah.
So I think that whenever you want to get good at something, you have to do it.
Right.
Or a variation very close to
That
it.
makes perfect sense. Maybe it would vary with someone who's brand new, where they're going to spend a lot more time on the bench press, someone who's never benched before. How about with much older athletes who've been benching for a long time? Would it make sense for them to cycle in different exercises that maybe address weaknesses, such as the floor press, things like that?
I would agree with that. I think you have to have some type of variety. When you've been doing something so long, if you're like me, you get in routines where you keep doing it because you like to do what you like to do.
Right.
Sometimes you're in a hurry, you can still get your workout in, things like that. It's good to then provide some type of variety to stimulate the body. If you would get away from it, not for a long period of time, but for some time, stimulate the body and then get back to it, you might find some benefit where there's a carryover and you're going to improve on the bench press.
Right.
So I would agree with that. Not doing the same old thing all the time. And with younger kids, obviously they got to get the technique and the form down, so they got to keep doing it.
Yeah. It makes sense that you don't want to have too long a time period away from an exercise. For example, if you just did dumbbell presses for 3 months and then came back to the bench press, your technique's just going to be thrown off. So for someone who really wants to improve the bench press, it makes sense.
There's going to be an
that
adaptation period, where it's going to take some time to get back to learning the technique that you had. And I found that when I was doing strongman competitions, if I hadn't done an event for a while, you know, I'm sitting there trying to remember what I used to know how to do, you know, or if I haven't deadlifted in a while, it would take a few weeks to go, I forgot, I remember I got to push that way, I got to breathe in at that.
Get back in that groove.
So it takes a while to get back in the groove. So, you know, if you even did it every other week or whatever, where you kept it back, you know, into your routine, where you wouldn't forget those little nuances in your technique, I think it's better that way. Okay. So Pierre's going to get in on the bench. He's going to wind himself in. He wants to be like a spring on the bench. So everything's tight. Okay, his feet are wide, they're underneath him, his heels are on the ground. Okay, so if he pushes up, his glutes are going to still stay on the bench. You're touching right now, he's got a little bit of an arch to his back here. His lats are tucked behind him. He's making his chest as big as possible to shorten the distance from here to here. Okay, all right, his hands and his pinkies are just right on the edge of the ring there. That's where he likes them. Okay, he's on the meaty part of his hand. He's a little bit towards the pads in on his fingers. Okay, but he's still on the meaty part of his palms. All right, eyes directly underneath the bar. I'm going to help him lift it out so we save his shoulders a little bit. Okay, 2, 3. Good, here we go. One deep breath in. Okay, he's coming down to his sternum. If the bar is slightly down to slightly forward towards his eyes on the way up. He's touching the exact same spot on his chest. Okay, All right, so that was a good warm-up for him. One breath, did enough of a warm-up to where he's not burning himself out for his heavier sets, and then we can progress from here. Pierre's going to get on here again. All right, he's going to wind himself in. All right, this is going to be a little bit heavier set here. We're going to do a couple. Again, feet are dug in, slight arch, glutes are fired tight, lats are underneath him, eyes are under the bar. He's got his same grip. 1, 2, 3. Good. Deep breath. Accelerate up. Good. 1, 2. Good job. And if you notice his elbows, they're about 45 degrees angle from the body right here when he brings it down. Okay, that's exactly where we want to be.
So a good auxiliary exercise or a supplementary exercise for the bench press is the floor press. And what do you think are the benefits of the floor press that are different than the bench press?
Well, obviously you're going to use your triceps quite a bit.
Right.
Okay. We're going to come down, slight pause on the ground, drive the weight up, and focus on using the triceps. Still staying tight on the ground. Okay. So it's basically it is to work that area of your bench press that you're a little bit weaker, and if that's your triceps.
Right.
Doesn't open the shoulder capsule up as much at the bottom. So if you want to do a limited range of motion bench press, obviously this and or board press would work. So you may have some athletes where you got to watch that a little bit. Okay, so arms are basically going to be at 90-degree bend. You're not going to come all the way down to the chest. So
right.
You can still get the benefits of bench pressing without worrying about affecting the shoulders or if there's any irritation in the shoulders.
Right.
Or problems with
Many aging athletes find that it starts becoming painful
Right.
to get that full range in the bench press. So this would be a good substitute
Right.
for that category.
Yeah, and you know, with this and let's say the board press, you really don't lose that much if you were going to test the bench press on your maximum. And for, you know, aging athletes or aging people in general,
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter anyway. You know,
Right.
you're just trying to get the exercise in.
Yeah.
So, but if you were going to test it and you did a lot of floor press and board press and whatnot, and you never really bench press a lot because it affected your shoulders, it wouldn't really say, okay, you're losing that much of off your maximum. You know?
Right.
But you would do it just because it's safer on the athlete.
Yeah. Now, do you find that you're stronger on the floor press, or do you think it's harder than the bench press?
For me, I found out it was harder.
Right.
I mean,
Because the legs
obviously
are
you
taken
come
out of
down-
the equation. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes to a complete stop.
Right.
Legs are taken out. You're flat on the ground. There's different reasons why, but yeah, it's used as a tool to improve
Yeah.
the bench press.
And generally, what rep range do you have people use over here at PSI?
We're usually 5 and under.
Right.
Yeah,
So
not
it's
a lot of
treated more
reps.
as a power
Exactly.
exercise,
Yeah.
not an endurance exercise.
Work on the explosion off the ground.
Yeah.
Accelerate the bar up. So. Yeah.
Are there any common flaws you see people make when they do floor presses?
Trying to bounce off the ground?
Oh, really?
Come down